Hello everyone, I'm Demetrius Johnson with The People Speak. This program is designed to hear the voice of the voiceless. This program is designed to give our community and every community an opportunity to express themselves so we can listen and hear. In order for us to get to one place to another place to make this community better, it is time for us now to listen. We got a great show lined up ahead. We're going to be talking to various people that have a lot of things on their mind that needs to be said and need to be talked about. It's going to be candid, it's going to be honest, but it's going to be fair. Stay tuned. Look forward to talking about it. Welcome back to The People Speak. I'm now with the president of the St. Louis Chamber, Joe Reagan. Joe, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on the show.
Well, this is 3 days of a tumultuous situation in the city of St. Louis with the verdict coming down. Anthony Lamar Smith, the police officer Jason Stockley that was found innocent, and just turmoil just broken out. What do we need to do? What can we do? And what do you think the issues are?
You know, I think obviously people get focused in the short term on damage, property damage, and kind of the turmoil that comes not from peaceful demonstrations, but rather some people that might take part in some, criminal activity. But you know what? We've got to look at the real economic impact, which is the fact of racial disparity and the distrust that many in our community have in the justice system. So I think we've got to get right to the root of the matters here in St. Louis and be able to get people together and say, what do we need to do to change that?
How difficult do you think that would be when you hear some people say, hey, that was the right decision, that's the right thing to do, these people are overreacting, he was a felon and things like that. But the root cause of everything, no one wants to touch and discuss.
No, I think, we're going to continue to have these situations in terms of verdicts and decisions as long as we're losing people in the streets. And I think we're losing people to drugs, we're losing people to police shootings, we're losing people to not having the hope and the opportunities that they have. And, look, it certainly is a social and moral imperative to do better. But I think it's an economic imperative too. We can't grow as a community. We can't be the kind of place that we want to be going forward unless we get down to root causes.
Hi. You think you're probably sober?
Yeah.
But you're thinking about taking the back roads home just in case. Why would you do that?
Probably okay isn't okay. Call a cab, a car, or a friend.
Good choice.
I'm now excited to be joined by a gentleman whose creative mind has put this whole dynamic together here in a loop in St. Louis. I want to say, Joe Hilbert, how you doing, man?
I'm doing all right, thank you very much. It's great to see you. Great to see you on this particular night.
Been very difficult for you guys for the last few days with the protesting and this unrest going on in the community. How do you deal with it, and what is your take on it?
Well, I admire the peaceful protesters. I think to get their messages out is very important. And the first couple of protest marches on Saturday were very peaceful. The one in the afternoon and the early evening. It's only late at night when a couple of not so great people came in and mingled and did some damage that hurts the cause of the protesters. That's what's so frustrating. This area is an area that embraces everything that people are marching for. And through the decades, this area has gone through a big decline until the 1960s, early 70s, and has slowly come back and overcome adversity by embracing diversity. So if any area for people to protest in, it should be a friendly, positive one. There are so many minority-owned businesses and so many women-owned businesses in this area that are putting their hearts and souls into their businesses and their life savings to support their families and the neighborhood. And they're the ones that are suffering unnecessarily, and they're the ones that support a lot of the causes that people are marching for. So I've never quite understood how the people that want to damage something think they're helping the cause, because they're not. But anyway, this is one of the 10 great streets in America, and it's because of all the independent businesses and all the individuals that work so hard day after day.
Don't matter what color, age, or anything, what genre is, if you treat people right, that's it.
Yep.
I really appreciate you, man. You're a good guy. We need to take your blueprint throughout the whole Metro East area and have people to put it together. How did you get it? That's what I need. You need to look in this camera and tell the viewing audience, how did you get it?
I had very open-minded and tolerant parents that set the example for me, and it was wonderful growing up, where when you're really young, there is no color division. I mean, when you're 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, it's only when you start getting at kindergarten or grade school, and mainly from other parents, that you start, getting that kind of feeling of the differences. So I was very lucky that way, and my whole credo for Blueberry Hill is to treat people with respect and consideration, and that's it. It's the golden rule, basically.
That's the rule I'm gonna live by. Treat people with respect and dignity. Joe Edwards, man, it's always an honor talking to you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
If most people listen and hear his message, maybe we can have a different St. Louis area. I guarantee if you come down to the Loop in U City, it's one of the most beautiful, diverse communities you would ever want to see. He just spoke. We'll be right back.
Don't wait. Communicate. Make your emergency plan today.
Welcome back. I'm now joined with a gentleman that I had an opportunity to meet years ago and had the opportunity to bump into him here in the Loop. Minister Felix Gibson. How you doing, Minister?
I'm fine. Yourself, Mr. Johnson.
Talk about this difficult time we're going to, man. And the verdict came down. Jason Stockley is innocent, and just chaos is broken out in our community. What do we do?
Well, I would think probably one of the first things we need to do is probably come together and try to come to reason based upon the verdict. We don't always like what comes out, the judicial system, but however, life goes on. It's like to the African-American family today, it's like a punch a punch below the belt. A lot of us are not pleased with the verdict, after seeing the evidence that we saw prior to leading up to the verdict. And based upon what we saw, we had our own mindset that it was no way possible. But when you look at the history of the police brutality throughout America, you've had so many officers have been acquitted, have been not found not guilty. And the young man that was shot in the car coming from his job, who said he had a license to carry a weapon, was shot and killed right there. But yet the verdict was he was not guilty. You find in all the, even with the Trayvon Martin, it's so many that we as a black people, we struggle with those verdicts, and it goes on. It's like another one bites the dust. It's almost like, where do justice really take its course? And then the court now has set it up, whereas if I kill a man based upon a police officer killing a man, the law changes. And I guess that's fine for those who don't know that and how that breaks down with some of this.
So it's safe to say that fairness, equity, fair equity,
yeah,
in the judicial system for us.
We would want fair ground. If it's going to be one way, let it be one way both ways. Not let it be one way this way and one way that way for this race of people or that race of people, because that's not what we're trying to, that's not the message we're trying to put out.
So how do we address, when you hear people say that the judicial system is blind, and we always, as African Americans, look and say, hey, once again, we knew this was going to happen. Before it happened, we knew the guy was not going to be, found guilty. It's almost like a repetitive action that's going through our lives. And then black men, as we are, it's a fear factor for us now.
Of course. I was sitting down talking to one of my sons. I'm a father of 7 sons, and 2 have been into the subpoena institution. So they've been affected by the system. And I was just listening at my last son, who just recently came home a couple of years ago, and he was telling me, he said, well, Daddy, I really don't care what happens. He said, because I'm a part of the system. I really don't care pretty much how things, I don't want to see people, businesses get tore up. I don't want to see the community tore up. But based on how the system has treated me and how the system has treated others, and he named all of these different cases. And I didn't know he knew them name by name, city by city. But based upon what he has experienced, he was really totally upset. And me as a father trying to calm that same son down, to bring him back to reality that no matter what, this is what goes on in America. It hasn't stopped. It's been before his time, you know, to sit in a prison and not be able to come home to see his mother when she passed away. That was a blow to him. And then to come out now. And you know, if I could take you to his house, to see how he's went back to pick up the life that he lost with his children. He almost made his backyard a playground to pick up what he was taught. You know, the man, when he's out the home, this is what the child misses. And now to see him come home now and to bring that fathership back, to win his little son back, to raise his children in a community not very far from here, in the Western community. But he still haven't given up. But just to listen at his upsetness based upon how the system has smacked us in the face again. So we as a people, we got to stand. We as a black man, African American. I come up in this city. And you know, I came up from the north side of the city, so I know about this. So even now, I'm still marching in the Martin Luther King March. I'm still, whenever these things happen, it has an effect because I have to go home and sit and talk to my grandchildren now. My grandsons are coming up.
I'm with Adam. He is the owner of Mission Taco and having a great conversation about a very difficult time. Protesting going to be starting again in the next 30 minutes. A lot of your employees feel nervous. What is going on and how you and your employees are feeling right now?
I mean, there's obviously, after what happened in the Loop on Saturday night, you know, they're a little frightened. We stayed open through the protests. It was very peaceful. You know, as been said before, you know, it was fantastic, very supportive. You know, our staff here in the Loop, very liberal-minded people, people from all walks of life, and you know, and then all of a sudden it turned ugly, and we shut down pretty quickly. We were very lucky, you know, not to have any damage done to our building. Got very lucky in the Central West End on Friday night with our Mission Taco joint location there. There were some windows broken around us and a strong police force right in front, but you know, people are just a little nervous.
How is it affecting your business, the financial piece of your business, with the uncertainties of what's going to happen?
Yeah, a lot. But honestly, that doesn't matter. You know, we're a decent size chain now here in St. Louis, and we can weather the storm a bit. So on our end, you know, that's not what this is about. This is about community. It's about, at the end of the night, the safety of our guests and employees. But a lot of these other businesses are smaller mom and pops, and you know, this is very difficult. I know on our end, our sales are down over the weekend 30 to 40% at our stores. Well, and that just not takes a hit on the bottom line,
yeah,
but also the service staff, you know, who are relying on tips that they generally make.
Now, we spoke, and you're saying you're from the West Coast, pretty much.
Yeah.
Mindset's different in the West Coast than the Midwest.
Right.
Particularly the state of Missouri, the mindsets are different. You have conservative people here, and so the separatism is off the charts here. But in this area in the Loop, it's galvanizing. Everyone come and be a part of it. What do we do? How do we make it better? How do we make people want to be like you, Joe Edwards, Joe Reagan, other folks in the community who truly want inclusion? I ain't talking about diversity, I'm talking about inclusionary practices. What do we do?
If I had the answer to that, I really don't know. I mean, I'm a college dropout, you know, restaurant owner, and you know, we just do the best we can on an individual basis, you know. So what can I do? We've got a lot of employees in St. Louis. We've got amazing hiring practices. We take care of our people. We pay them well. We've got a higher internal minimum wage than most places. So it's just about taking care of people, being understanding, and just having an open mind.
Open mind. So in order for St. Louis, particularly the city, or let's say the state, to get past this and moving forward, how do the African American community, I'm gonna say the black community, how does the black community get whites who are middle class, upper middle class, higher middle class, and just really elite, how do we get them to see that there are differences? And in order for our whole region to be better, we got to accept the differences and try to work to make everybody better. How do we do that?
Man, I don't know. I think that's the question of the day, and unfortunately, I'm not that guy to answer that. I can't speak for what others, are about.
Well, speak from your concept and how you as inclusion in your company and how you want everybody to feel as equal partners in working abilities in your establishments.
That's just, I grew up a little different. I grew up, the son of a military father, and we moved around. So, I've seen, very segregated parts of Virginia where I've lived. I've seen very, very inclusionary San Diego, where I went to predominantly Laotian school. And, so I've kind of seen all walks of life in all parts of the country. St. Louis as a region is not like that. And, I don't know.
How do we start having candid conversations? How do we start now taking a conversation where you don't feel comfortable with, but you know is needed?
Sure.
What do we do?
Get out of the loop where people have similar mindset. Get out to the areas surrounding where people don't. This is going to be the second night of protests in the Loop, and those protests are affecting small business owners. A lot of them, immigrants are Thai neighbors next door. Mm-hmm. You got a lot of black-owned businesses around here, and these are just all small businesses. This is one of the most diverse communities that we have, and we're protesting here, hurting these businesses. These protests need to be taking place in other parts of St. Louis where they're needed, in my opinion. Mm-hmm.
Maybe some of the affluent areas like Ladue, places like that, where the accommodations or the welcoming is not as friendly as it should be.
Correct. The people that we should be speaking to are sitting at home tonight, with popcorn and a beer, watching this happen on TV.
A lot of people would say that whites are not supporting this and that it's so divisive.
Well, I think actually this time around I've been a little surprised at how many white people are supporting this. They've seen the videos. Perhaps they've become a little more familiar with racial profiling and things since in the wake of Michael Brown. And I was talking to a regional bank president of a bank in Clayton the other day, and he said that he just couldn't believe the verdict, that, with the judge having some leeway, he couldn't believe that it didn't come down with second degree or manslaughter or something. So
now I'm looking at your sign and it says Black Lives Matter. And I have some of my friends, white friends, would say that means you're saying white lives don't matter. That's not saying that.
No, because honestly, white people are not being shot and killed. And black, especially young black males, as well as Native American youth are targeted. And I've known about it since I was 18, when a kid on the Choctaw Reservation was shot in the back as he was running away from a Mississippi policeman. And it's really sad to me that Missouri has now become the new Mississippi, and of course it's happening all over the country, but we can't have racism to the extent that we have it in our system, that these killer cops are just getting away with murder.
I'm here now joined by a very prominent lady in our community, Kitty Radcliffe. She's the president of,
Explore St. Louis.
and I like that. and what is Explore St. Louis?
Well, it's the organization that tells people that St. Louis is a great place to visit. So we're an economic development agency for our community, helping to sell the assets that we have to people who don't live here, for the sole purpose of getting them to come here and spend a whole lot of money and create the jobs that come along with that.
Well, the last few days in St. Louis has been very difficult on you. U2 concert was here and got canceled. The Jason Stockley verdict came out. How has that impacted you guys here in the business here?
Well, there's obviously a lot of national and even some international press that comes along with this that shows the very unflattering aspects of what's going on in the community. And we have no control over that. You know, the media were staked out here for weeks waiting for that verdict, and prepared to show the worst of the worst. In the media cycle outside of this community, really the only thing that happens is that people read headlines and see the images that are put in front of them. They never really read the whole story, and they don't understand the why or the how. They just understand the what. That something is going on, and it's a very negative perception that is put out there about St. Louis, and it makes it very challenging for us to do business.
We had the Michael Brown verdict a few years ago, now the Jason Stockley verdict now. How has that really just destroyed the community in terms of relationships, particularly race relationships?
Yeah.
How do you think that has really just divided us even more?
Right. Well, our as you just pointed out, our race relationships in this community have always been difficult. There's a tension that occurs because there's a large population in our community that is encased in poverty, and generations of it now, in a cycle that makes it very hard to get out of. And people who feel like their rights are not respected. And so, these two incidents, the Michael Brown incident in Ferguson and now the Stockley verdict, have made those situations that much worse, because they just reinforce that opinion that nobody cares about us.
How do we, people in our positions, how do we look at the community and say there are problems? How can we take candid conversations where we don't feel comfortable about our conversations,
right,
but we know we need to have them rather than pretending like they're not there?
Right. Well, we have to have them. And when we don't have them, things like this occur. In the police department, there are great cops.
No question about it.
And there's some bad apples.
No question about it.
In the poverty-stricken sections of our community, there are great and wonderful citizens, many of whom work with us. And there's some bad apples. Mm-hmm. And I don't know about your family, but in my family, we've got a couple of bad apples too. Mm-hmm. That's not going to change. There are always going to be some people who ruin it for the rest. And so what we have to do is try to figure out how to move past the issues that those people will cause, whether they cause problems within your family environment and create heartache for everybody that you care about, or whether they cause problems in your community and create heartache for the entire community. And so if you can't recognize that in other people and you aren't willing to have a conversation about it, then the come to Jesus conversation that you have with your alcoholic brother, not you, me. If you can't have those conversations and try to address those problems, they're never going to go away. We have to do this.
It sounds difficult, but it's real easy if we have people with open minds. So when the verdict came down, you hear just how divided it was. The black community, we knew it was going to happen. The white community, he went by the letter of the law. Right. How do we bring a medium here to say, okay, I understand what you guys are going through. Understand that we need help. How do we get white middle-class folks in St. Louis to look at the African-American community and say, you know what, there are issues. we can't be afraid of it.
Right.
We got to attack and try to work with it.
Well, we saw that after Ferguson. We saw that come about because a lot of people's eyes were open to something that perhaps they had not seen before. Or perhaps they'd seen it, but they didn't feel they had any responsibility for it or any place in the resolution of it. That changed a lot in the aftermath of Ferguson, and we saw a lot of people take initiatives to do some things. And one of the results of that was that we invited the National Urban League here to have their convention here. Within 4 months of what had happened to Michael Brown in August in Ferguson, we were in the offices of the Urban League in New York and asked Mark Morial to bring the conversation to St. Louis. Let us put a spotlight on things that happen all around the country. They're not restricted to this community, but put a spotlight on the things that are wrong and also what people are doing about them. And that very successful convention, which had a lot of good conversations, panel discussions from people in our community here that were the audience, they were the panel discussions for people from around the country who all took those ideas and went back to their own communities, whether that's Baltimore or Detroit or Houston or wherever they came from. And we just have to do more of that. We can't stop. We didn't get here easily, and we're not going to get out of it easily. But we have to confront it, and we have to keep at it. And we can't just check a box and say, hey, we're done with that now, because we're not done and we're not going to be done.
NAACP had issued a travel advisory in a very difficult time when Urban League was having their convention.
Yes, they did.
Now with this verdict and just the turmoil that's going on in the community, how do you tell people what the NAACP issue was wrong?
Yeah.
When it seemed from outside looking in said they were 100% right.
Right. It reinforces this verdict and what's happened as a result of it reinforces the belief that what they did was right. Look, I'm a member of the NAACP. I'm a member of most of the organizations and have been for a long time. I've been an ACLU member for 20 years, and the ACLU backed the NAACP's. It still doesn't mean it was right in its approach. We understand why it occurred. We understand it was about the bill. We understand a lot of problems with that bill that was signed. But by the time the Missouri branch of the NAACP took that issue to the National Convention of the NAACP on the floor and asked them to support it in hopes of keeping that bill from becoming law, there was no way that bill was not going to become law. It was too late. So to issue that travel advisory when they issued it, the timing was wrong. If they had tried to take some action while that bill was still making its way through the legislature, beyond testifying, which they tried to do, they tried to testify against it, but if they had taken some action to help the legislators who were then going to vote on it understand it better, then perhaps it wouldn't be law. The first thing that we have to do is talk, right? We have to engage in dialogue. People have to be willing to be as candid without being confrontational as possible. I mean, you have to tell people how you feel, and you have to tell them why you feel it, but you don't need to yell at them and shout at them, because then the people they're talking to just put up walls.
Welcome back to The People Speak. We've heard from various people in our community about what's going on. We've had the opportunity to have candid conversations with business owners, people walking down the street, community civic-minded people. One thing that we all have in common is that we want fairness. Is it truly fair when you look at the Michael Brown case, when you look at the Anthony Lamar Smith case? Neither officer was charged with murder in those cases. And you want to talk about justice is blind? I wonder how true that is. I'm Demetrius Johnson, and you've been watching The People Speak.